Julian Thorne sat alone at table 12, holding a cup of tea that had gone completely cold. Around him, the grand estate in Princeton hummed with celebration. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across polished wood floors. Laughter cascaded through the air like champagne bubbles. A string quartet played something sweeping and romantic near the terrace doors, where autumn leaves pressed against the glass like they wanted to join the party. But Julian felt none of it. He'd been to 4 weddings since Elena died. Julian Thorne sat alone at table 12, holding a cup of tea that had gone completely cold. Around him, the grand estate in Princeton hummed with celebration. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across polished wood floors. Laughter cascaded through the air like champagne bubbles. A string quartet played something sweeping and romantic near the terrace doors, where autumn leaves pressed against the glass like they wanted to join the party. But Julian felt none of it. He'd been to 4 weddings since Elena died. 4 years, 4 weddings, 4 rounds of watching other people promise forever, while his own had ended in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and failure. He wasn't sad anymore. Not the kind that doubled you over in grocery store aisles or made you pull off the highway to cry. That grief had burned itself out somewhere between year 2 and year 3. What remained was something worse, a tiredness that lived in his bones, a sense that he was always one conversation away from being found out, that everyone could see he was just going through the motions, saying the right things, smiling at the right moments, but not actually here, not really. He'd done his duty tonight, shook the groom's hand, kissed the bride's cheek, told them they looked perfect together, which was true, they did. Everyone here looked perfect. The ivy crawling up the estate walls was perfect. The scent of expansive lilies and wood smoke drifting from the fireplace was perfect. Even the damn teacup in his hand, with its delicate gold rim, was perfect. Julian just didn't belong in perfect anymore. He slid his car keys halfway out of his jacket pocket, checking the time on his phone. 9:15. Respectable. No one would notice if he left now. He could be home in Montclair by 10. Stretched out on the couch with the lights off and the silence pressing against his ears like a hand. He was already mentally rehearsing his exit, wave to the bride's mother, nod to the bartender, slip out through the side garden, when a small hand touched his sleeve. Julian looked down. A little girl stood beside his chair, maybe 7 years old, wearing a pale pink dress that looked like it had been ironed within an inch of its life. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes, sharp, green, unnervingly focused, studied him with the intensity of someone conducting an experiment. She didn't smile, didn't ask for help finding her mom or where the bathroom was. Instead, she leaned in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You look like you're waiting for the world to end." Julian blinked. "Excuse me?" "That's what my teacher says when someone looks sad but won't admit it." The girl tilted her head, still watching him like he was a puzzle she was determined to solve. "You keep checking your phone. You haven't talked to anyone in 20 minutes, and your tea's been cold for at least 10. Julian glanced at the teacup, then back at her. "You've been timing me?" "I notice things." She said it matter-of-factly, the way some kids announce they were good at spelling or could do a cartwheel. "My mom looks like that too, like she's pretending everything's fine, but really she just wants to leave." Julian followed the girl's gaze across the room. There, near one of the marble pillars, stood a woman in a black lace dress. She was beautiful, strikingly so, but it was the kind of beauty that felt like armor. Her posture was rigid, shoulders pulled back, smile stretched just a little too wide. She was surrounded by a cluster of older women, all of them talking at her with the aggressive enthusiasm of people who thought they were helping. Julian recognized that smile. He'd worn it himself 100 times. It was the smile you gave when someone told you that you were still young, or that the right person would come along, or that everything happens for a reason. It was the smile that said, "I hear you, but I'm dying inside." Julian recognized that smile too. The girl tugged his sleeve again, pulling his attention back. They keep asking her why she's still single, like it's a disease or something, like she's broken. Julian's chest tightened. He knew exactly what that felt like. "And you want me to do what, exactly?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The girl straightened, crossing her arms like she was about to deliver a business proposal. "I want you to pretend you're with us, just for 1 hour. You walk over there, stand next to my mom, and act like we're a family. They'll leave her alone if they think she's not single anymore." Julian stared at her. "You want me to lie to a room full of strangers?" "I want you to help my mom stop smiling like that." The girl's voice didn't waver. "Because that smile means she's about to cry in the bathroom again, and I'm tired of hearing it." Something cracked open in Julian's chest. Not wide, just enough to let a sliver of light through. He looked at the woman again, then back at the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mia Vance." Then, as if sealing a deal, she reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. "I'll pay you." Julian almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he took the bill, smoothed it out, and tucked it back into her small hand. "Keep your money," he said, standing up. His knees protested. He'd been sitting too long. "Let's go save your mom." Mia's face lit up, but only for a second. Then she was all business again, grabbing his hand and leading him across the reception hall like a general marching into battle. Julian didn't know what he was doing. Didn't know if this was the stupidest decision he'd made in 4 years, or the first honest one. But as they wove through tables and sidestepped dancing couples, as the woman in the black lace dress came into sharper focus, her brittle smile, her exhausted eyes, the way she held her wine glass like it was the only thing keeping her upright, Julian realized something. He wasn't rescuing her. She was rescuing him. Before we dive into this story, I need your help. We're on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription gets us closer to that goal. If you enjoy stories about complicated love, about people who choose each other despite the odds, please hit that subscribe button. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? Drop a comment and tell me your city or country. Building this community means everything, and knowing where you all are from makes it even special.
Mia didn't let go of his hand until they were 3 feet from the circle of women. Up close, Julian could see the cracks in Clara's composure, the way her fingers gripped the stem of her wine glass just a little too tight, the faint shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, the slight tremor in her smile when one of the older women, silver-haired, dripping pearls, leaned in and said something that made Clara's jaw tighten. "Clara, darling," the woman was saying, her voice syrupy with concern, "you really should let me introduce you to my nephew. He's a lawyer, very successful, and he's been asking about you." "That's very kind, Margaret," Clara said, her tone polite but strained. "But I'm not really looking right now." "Oh, nonsense. You can't stay single forever. What about Mia? She needs a father figure." Julian watched Clara's smile crack at the edges, watched her take a breath that didn't quite fill her lungs. And then Mia tugged his hand forward. "Mom," Mia said brightly, her voice cutting through the conversation like a knife through butter. "Julian's here." Every head in the circle turned. Clara's eyes widened. Confusion flickered across her face, followed quickly by panic. She opened her mouth, probably to ask who the hell Julian was, but before she could speak, Julian stepped forward and placed his hand gently on the small of her back. The touch was light, barely there, but it was enough. Clara froze. Her eyes met his, and in that split second, Julian saw everything. The exhaustion, the shame, the desperate, unspoken plea for someone to just make it stop. He'd worn that same expression at his wife's funeral when people kept asking if he was okay. "Sorry I'm late," Julian said smoothly, turning to the women with an easy smile. Traffic getting out of Montclair was brutal. Margaret blinked, her syrupy expression curdling slightly. "Oh, I didn't realize Clara was seeing anyone." "We've been keeping it quiet," Julian said, his hand still resting on Clara's back. He could feel the tension in her spine, the way she was holding her breath. "You know how it is. Didn't want to make a big deal of it." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "How long have you two been together?" Julian felt Clara stiffen under his palm. He glanced down at Mia, who was staring up at him with absolute confidence, like she knew he wouldn't let them down. 3 months, Julian said, give or take. Clara exhaled, slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for years. "Well then," Margaret said, her tone cooling considerably. "How lovely. I suppose I'll have to tell my nephew he missed his chance." "I suppose so," Julian said, his smile never wavering. The circle of women began to disperse, their interest in Clara evaporating now that she was no longer a project to be fixed. Within seconds, they'd moved on to their next target, a younger woman near the dessert table, who looked equally trapped. The moment they were gone, Clara turned to Julian, her eyes wide. "What just happened?" Clara whispered. "I have no idea," Julian said honestly. Mia grinned. "I told you he'd help." Clara looked down at her daughter, then back at Julian. For a long moment she didn't say anything, just stared at him like she was trying to figure out if he was real or some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Then, slowly, her shoulders dropped, the brittle smile faded, and for the first time all night, she looked like an actual person instead of a performance. "Thank you," she said quietly. Julian nodded. "You're welcome." Mia tugged her sleeve. "Now you have to stay for at least an hour. That was the deal." Julian raised an eyebrow. "The deal?" "You pretend we're a family for 1 hour. That way no one else will bother us, and maybe you'll stop looking like you're waiting for the world to end." Clara's cheeks flushed. "Mia." "She's not wrong," Julian said, surprising himself. He looked at Clara, really looked at her, and saw the same exhaustion he felt every morning when he dragged himself out of bed. "Pretending what?" Clara asked, her expression softening. "That I'm fine," Julian said, "that I belong here, that I'm not just tired." Clara's breath hitched. She nodded slowly, like he just said something she'd been thinking for years but never put into words. "Okay," she said finally. 1 hour. Mia beamed. "Perfect. Now let's get cake before it's all gone." And just like that, Julian found himself walking toward the dessert table with a woman he'd never met and a 7-year-old who somehow became his accomplice in the strangest act of rebellion he'd ever committed. For the first time in 4 years, he wasn't pretending. He was just here. They found a quieter corner near the terrace doors, away from the band and the clinking glasses and the relentless cheer. Mia sat between them, demolishing a slice of chocolate cake with surgical precision, while Julian and Clara stood in the kind of silence that didn't feel awkward, just necessary. Outside, the autumn wind pressed against the glass, sending leaves skittering across the stone patio. Julian watched them tumble and thought about how strange it was that he felt more grounded in this moment, standing next to a stranger at a wedding he didn't want to attend, than he had in months. "So?" Clara said finally, her voice low. "What's your story?" Julian glanced at her. "My story?" "You don't strike me as someone who crashes weddings to rescue single moms," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Which means Mia must have caught you at a vulnerable moment." Julian huffed a quiet laugh. "She told me I looked like I was waiting for the world to end." Clara winced. She has a gift for uncomfortable truths. "She's not wrong," Julian said. He turned to face Clara fully, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe. "I'm a widower. 4 years. My wife, Elena, died of cancer, and I've spent the last 4 years convincing everyone, including myself, that I'm fine." Clara's expression shifted. Not pity, something deeper. Recognition. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Don't be, Julian said. I'm tired of people being sorry. I came tonight because my business partner insisted, said I needed to get out more, but all I wanted to do was sit in my car and go home. Clara nodded slowly. I know that feeling. What about you? What's your story? Clara hesitated, glancing down at Mia, who was too focused on her cake to pay attention. I'm a pediatric nurse at Princeton Medical. Single mom. Mia's dad left when she was 2. Haven't heard from him since. Julian felt something tighten in his chest. So you've been doing this alone? 7 years, Clara said. And honestly, most days I'm fine. I love my job, I love Mia. But nights like this, she trailed off, shaking her head. Nights like this, I feel like I'm wearing a scarlet letter, like everyone's looking at me and thinking, poor Clara, she's still alone. They're not thinking that. Margaret was. Julian smiled faintly. Margaret is a vulture. Clara laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. That's the perfect word for her. I've met 1,000 Margarets, Julian said. They show up at every funeral, every social event, every quiet moment you're just trying to survive. They think they're helping, but really they just want to feel useful. Clara studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to decode something. You get it, she said softly. I do, Julian said. Mia looked up from her plate, chocolate smeared on her chin. Are you two done being sad? 'Cause there's dancing and I want to dance. Clara blinked, then laughed again, wiping Mia's face with a napkin. We're not being sad, baby. We're just talking. Talking like grown-ups is basically the same thing, Mia said. She grabbed Julian's hand. Come on, I need a partner. Julian looked at Clara, who shrugged, her smile widening. She's very persuasive. I'm learning that, Julian said. He let Mia drag him onto the dance floor, where a slow song had just started. Mia stood on his shoes, gripping his hands, and Julian moved carefully, not to step on her. Over her head, he caught sight of Clara watching them from the edge of the floor, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But her eyes were soft. When the song ended, Mia ran back to Clara, breathless and grinning. Your turn, Mom. Clara shook her head. Mia, I don't think... One dance, Mia insisted. It's part of the deal. Julian held out his hand. She's very persuasive, Julian repeated. Clara hesitated, then slowly she took his hand. They moved to the center of the floor, and Julian placed one hand lightly on her waist, the other holding hers. She smelled like lavender and something faintly medicinal, hand sanitizer maybe from work. Up close, you could see the faint lines around her eyes, the exhaustion that makeup couldn't hide. But you could also see the way she softened when Mia laughed, the way her shoulders finally relaxed, the way she looked at him, not with gratitude, but with understanding. I stopped designing gardens after Elena died, Julian said. Clara's eyes flicked up at him. You're a landscape architect? Was, Julian said. I still run the business, but I don't design anymore. Can't. Every garden I drew felt like a lie, like I was trying to create something beautiful when I didn't believe in beauty anymore. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I stopped dating 2 years ago. Why? Because every man I met wanted to rescue me, she said, and I didn't want to be rescued. I wanted to be seen. Julian nodded. I get that. They swayed in silence, the music washing over them. Around them, couples laughed and spun and celebrated, but Julian and Clara stayed still, locked in their own quiet orbit. This doesn't feel like pretending, Clara said finally. No, Julian agreed. It doesn't. Mia appeared beside them, tugging on Clara's dress. Can we stay a little longer? I like it here now. Clara looked at Julian, her eyes questioning. He smiled. 1 more hour. And for the first time in 4 years, Julian didn't want to leave early.
3 months later, Julian stood in the parking lot of Princeton Medical Center, staring at the automatic doors like they might swallow him whole. Clara had texted an hour ago. Mia fell at school, possible concussion. We're in the ER, don't worry. But Julian was worrying, because hospitals smelled like Elena's last days.
antiseptic, an industrial floor cleaner, and something underneath that no amount of bleach could cover. Fear packed into every corner. He forced himself through the doors. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright and too cold. Nurses moved past in scrubs that swished like whispers. A child cried somewhere down the hall. Julian's chest tightened. His hands went cold. He found Clara in room 7, sitting beside Mia's bed. Mia was awake, a small bandage on her forehead, looking annoyed more than hurt. "Julian!" Mia's face lit up when she saw him. "I told Mom you'd come." Clara stood, crossing to him quickly. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Julian said. But his voice sounded distant, even to his own ears. His gaze kept drifting to the monitors, the IV pole, the sterile white walls. Clara frowned. "Are you okay?" "Fine," Julian said automatically. But he wasn't fine. He was 4 years in the past, standing in a different hospital room, watching Elena's monitors flatline while a nurse gently asked him to step outside. "Julian," Clara said again, softer this time. She touched his arm. "Look at me." He did, and she must have seen it. The panic, the flashback, the way his breathing had gone shallow. "Come on," she said quietly. She turned to Mia. "We'll be right outside, baby." Mia nodded, already distracted by the TV mounted on the wall. Clara led Julian into the hallway, into a small alcove near the vending machines. She didn't say anything, just waited. "I can't do this," Julian said finally, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I thought I could, but I can't. Every time I walk into a hospital, I see her. I see the machines. I see the way she stopped recognizing me at the end." Clara's face didn't change, didn't fill with pity or disappointment. She just nodded. "Okay." "Okay?" Julian repeated, confused. "Okay," Clara said. "You're not ready, I get it." "But I want to be," Julian said, his voice breaking. "I want to be here for you, for Mia, but I don't know if I can." "Julian," Clara stepped closer, her hand still on his arm. "Love doesn't cure grief. It just coexists with it. And if you need time, take it. But don't leave because you think I need you to be perfect. I don't. I just need you to be honest." Julian stared at her. "Are you angry?" "No," Clara said. "I'm scared you're going to disappear because you think you're not good enough, and that would break my heart." Julian's throat tightened. He looked past her, toward room 7, where Mia was probably arguing with the nurse about whether she could have ice cream. "I don't want to leave," Julian said quietly. "Then don't," Clara said. He met her eyes. "What if I can't do this? Then we'll figure it out, together." Julian exhaled, slowly, and for the first time in an hour, his chest loosened. They went back into the room. Mia was fine, just a mild concussion, the doctor said. They'd be discharged within the hour. Julian sat beside the bed, holding Mia's hand, while she told him in exhaustive detail exactly how she'd fallen off the monkey bars and why it was absolutely not her fault. Clara watched them from the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But when Julian looked up and caught her eye, she smiled. Not the brittle, performative smile from the wedding, a real one. 1 year later, Julian stood in the same grand estate in Princeton, watching another wedding unfold. But this time, he wasn't alone at table 12. Clara sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his knee. Mia was across the room, dancing with the flower girl, her laughter cutting through the music like sunlight. Julian's tea was still warm. "You're smiling," Clara said, leaning closer. "Am I?" Julian asked. "You've been smiling for the last 10 minutes, Clara said. "It's kind of freaking me out." Julian laughed. "Sorry, I'm just happy." Clara's expression softened. "Good, you should be." Mia appeared beside them, breathless and grinning. "Julian, can we go get more cake?" "You just had cake," Clara said. "That was an hour ago," Mia argued. Julian stood, holding out his hand. "Come on, let's go before it's all gone." Mia grabbed his hand, then paused. She looked up at him, her green eyes serious. "Julian? Yeah? Are you gonna marry my mom?" Clara choked on her wine. "Mia!" But Julian didn't flinch. He crouched down, meeting Mia's eyes. "Would that be okay with you?" Mia considered this. "Only if I get to be the flower girl." Julian smiled. "Deal." Mia beamed, then ran off toward the dessert table, leaving Julian and Clara alone. Clara was staring at him, her cheeks flushed. "You didn't have to answer that." "I wanted to," Julian said. He stood, taking her hand. "I'm not pretending anymore, Clara. I'm done pretending." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Me too." They walked to the terrace doors, where the autumn leaves pressed against the glass like old friends. Outside, the world was cold and bright and impossibly beautiful. Julian didn't check his phone, didn't reach for his keys. He just stood there, holding Clara's hand, watching Mia spin in circles on the dance floor. And for the first time in 4 years, he wasn't waiting for the world to end. He was waiting for it to begin. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button. We're building something special here, a community of people who believe in second chances, in love that doesn't rescue but recognizes, in families built not by blood but by choice. Drop a comment and let me know, where are you from? What part of this story resonated with you? Your voice matters. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it, because sometimes the loneliest people just need to be seen. Thank you for being here.